synthesizers, groove boxes. Visit Patchworks in Seattle and online at patchworks.com.
Howdy. How's it going, everybody? This is Matthew from Patchworks, here with another episode of Patchworks Live, the synthesizer show that we put on every Friday at 3 o'clock. And hopefully doing this in a in-person capacity in the future in our showroom in Seattle. So look forward to that. As you may have seen in what's up, Ethan? What's up, friend man? Welcome to the stream. Pleasure to have you here on Friday. I am going to be using the ARP 2600M and the Polyend Tracker, which you can see right here. This is the ARP 2600M, and here we are with the Polyend Tracker. Michael, what's going on, Michael? Good to see you. So really what I wanted to talk about was is the ARP 2600M, which I'm just getting familiar with myself. And I just want to dive a bit into some sounds, and just right now what we're gonna do is look at how the how the unit kind of functions, but also some of the nicer sounds that you can get from the ARP 2600M, how to use an LFO with ARP 2600M, how to get sound out of the ARP 2600M. What's going on this panel here? What's happening? I feel like it could be a little easy to be overwhelmed by this unit because this just jacks everywhere. There's lines everywhere. Things got crazy names like voltage controlled filter resonator, VCF. If you're unfamiliar with synthesis and you see that, you're just going to be like, whoa, what does that mean? And how do I use it? And why would I want to use it? And there's a lot of stuff like that because this is an older synthesizer that has been remade several times. And this is the newest iteration, which I believe came out in 2022, the M version. And there's some reasons why they keep iterating on it. And they keep iterating on it because there are things that we start to expect from our gear as time passes. And we expect things to kind of get a little bit more interesting. There's just lines everywhere. Yeah, exactly. VCF, voice controlled fun. That's what I'm talking about, friend man. That's kind of like, that is what I mean. Like if you're not really familiar with synthesis, what does VCF mean to somebody who's never used a synthesizer before? Voice controlled fun is a good enough acronym. But it does stand for voltage controlled filter. But what voltage are we talking about? Where does this voltage come from? And why do I want to use voltage to control the filter? All that kind of stuff can be pretty overwhelming, especially with a unit like this. So as I was saying, it's an older unit that has now been updated in the last year and a half. And let me just tell you a little bit about where the ARP 2600 originally came from. So it was first developed in 1971. And it kind of played a big role in the evolution of electronic music. Alan R. Perlman, who was the founder of ARP Instruments, he designed it, and it was released. The 2500 was originally the first ARP that they released. The 2600 is the one that came out in 1971, and that's the one that got the most popularity. So it's been around for a really long time. This synthesizer design has been around forever, and as they keep making new iterations, they're adding new features to it. So the newest features, that was cheesy, but I give you credit for it because, trying is, you get an A for effort there. The new one has some new features to it, which is pretty cool, including a lot of great MIDI functionality. So they did do some reworks to it to make the attack release envelopes a little bit smoother so that it's easier to play with these dials. We have USB MIDI, we have full-size MIDI as well. We have these nice built-in speakers, and I can't demonstrate them to you very well over stream here, but these speakers actually sound fantastic. We got 2 filter types now. It's just a great sounding synthesizer, so let's demystify it a little bit. Starting here with our preamplifier. This is an envelope follower, so you could plug in your guitar into this unit. Literally, you can plug your guitar into it, and its preamp will play your guitar back. Won't sound great. We don't, you might want to use some sort of preamplifier outside of that for a guitar, particularly if you're trying to get your guitar's tone. But you could technically just plug your guitar right into the Korg ARP 2600, turn up its preamp, and use your envelope follower. And what that's going to do is it's actually going to follow the amplitude signal from your guitar. So as you strum harder, it's not going to have as much to do with the actual notes that you're playing as much as it does with the volume or how strong that signal is. So it'll follow the signal of your guitar, and you can use that CV, the control voltage that it generates, and you can apply it to different places in your synthesizer. That's something you can do with your voice, a guitar, external synthesizer. Anything that you plug into your preamplifier, you can use that envelope follower. We also have a ring modulator. A ring modulator takes the sum and the difference of 2 different inputs and outputs those sums and differences, and those are called sidebands. And ring modulators make some really interesting tones. So really cool to have a ring modulator in your synthesizer, in your analog synthesizer. So it's not a digital ring modulator, it's a real ring modulator, which actually requires a ring modulation circuit. So that's what's built into this. Then to the right here on the panel, we have 3 analog oscillators. And you can see that oscillator 1 here has 2 different waveforms it generates. It generates a sawtooth wave, and then here's a square wave. And then down below, we have all these jacks here with these little boxes underneath them. And then we have these dials. So what happens down below in this oscillator section is we have what's called normalizations. So a normalization means that imagine this cable is connected, but behind the hood, behind the faceplate. That's what a normalization is. Normalization just means where the invisible cables are already connected. So this synthesizer requires no patching for us to make a sound on it. We can give some sounds. Let's just make some sounds with it right now that I'm using the Polyend Tracker to trigger. It sounds awesome. It's a great sounding synthesizer. But below here with our normalizations, you can see what's already normaled here. So this is a big part of demystifying the ARP 2600 and making this a very attainable and usable synthesizer, is understanding that you need to break these normalizations if you want to do some like pretty generic features, such as like using an LFO, for instance. A lot of the original synthesizers that came out when synthesizers were first being popularized, they didn't have built-in LFOs. They had multiple oscillators, and you just slow down your oscillator and use it as an LFO. Like you'd have those modulation sources, but you wouldn't necessarily have an LFO built into your unit. So the ARP 2600 doesn't have an LFO, but it has 3 analog oscillators. And if you want to use one of the oscillators as your LFO, your best bet is to use oscillator 2. Oscillator 2 has a triangle, a sawtooth, a sine wave, and a pulse wave. So this is going to be your most complex waveform generating oscillator. So you do have to make a sacrifice. You're going to take your most complex waveform generating oscillator, and you're going to say, all right, I'm not going to use that one for sounds. I'm going to use it for modulation for other parts of the synthesizer. So if I wanted to make vibrato, for instance, what I would do is I would turn this switch down. This says keyboard on or keyboard off. What that means is that when this switch is on, this oscillator will react to the pitch that's generated by a keyboard or another sequencing device, such as the Polyend Tracker. When I have it switched down, it's just in free running mode. When it's in free running mode, my triggers, the notes that I generate, will affect these 2 oscillators, but skip this one so that I can use this oscillator in a static form so it doesn't alter. Then I can take these outputs that it generates, you jack right in here, plug into there, and I can take that and plug it into somewhere else. So by default, this one's actually already routed to VCO2 because they already kind of expect you to do what I'm doing. But if you want a triangle, you have to actually use a patch cable, and that's where your patch cables are going to come in handy. So by default, VCO2 has a sine wave that goes to this oscillator. So we turn this up even without the patch cable. You hear that modulation, and now we have some terribly deep vibrato. And what I mean is that by deep, I mean the depth at which that this oscillator is affecting this one is too much, it's too strong. So I either need to speed this oscillator up or reduce the depth. If the oscillator speeds up quickly, that means there's more opportunities for the reset of that oscillator to hit its fundamental frequency, the main frequency that I'm trying to generate from this one. So if I sped it up, it would give us an idea of us still hitting the right note. So it's still closer. It sounds a little crazy, but it sounds better than going really slow, right? Where we're just, there's no correct spot there. But if I reduce this depth and speed this up, we get into a sweet spot. And then we have real spring reverb in this unit. We can dial that in. It sounds awesome. Like, it just sounds awesome. So this is like having, imagine you're like, I want to get into synthesis, or I want to get into modular synthesis, and your budget is not what it would cost to fill a full, like, IntelliGel 107 synth HP or 104 HP 7U case, which would take roughly $4,000 to $5,000 possibly to fill the whole case. You know, you're not supposed to do it all at once. Typically, you build it as you go. But if you wanted all the features you would get from filling a case like that, that's where something like this unit comes in handy. This is basically like buying a Korg modular synthesizer. It has every function you could possibly need. So let's talk about more of these functions. So we know how to use this as an LFO now. So we have two oscillators still, and we can turn up those oscillators. They're running into this VCF right here, voltage controlled filter, or what were we calling it? Voice controlled, what? I forget what you said, but you had a good, you had a good one. Voice controlled fun. That's what it was. Voice controlled fun. There we go. Thanks, friend man. Friend man. So we can keep running these voltage controlled oscillators into the voice controlled fun and or VCF. And so they're going from here. They're coming out of these oscillators on their own without cables. They're normaled into this filter. And then from this filter, they're going out into the next section here, which is our amplifier section. And then from there, it's going into our mixer. There's some other features that happen down here and right here. This whole section right here, this is all modulation. So those are things you're going to be using to control your sound and adjust the way that the ARP 2600 sounds and functions. Right here is your standard ADSR. It looks wild, but it does look a lot like a modular synth module that you would buy, right? So imagine this is the filter section you would buy in modular. And this is 3 oscillators you would buy in modular, one of them being more robust than the other 2. And this is your noise generator and your voltage processor. And that's what these lines separating those elements are for. It's the same idea as a modular synthesizer, just at a more streamlined perspective and a lower price point. But you do also get this amazing true spring reverb, which is not something you find as often in modular. So we have our filter here, and it actually tells you the hertz right here, and you're using these faders. And if I open it up all the way, it's a highly resonant filter. So if you turn that resonance up all the way, you will be able to generate a sine wave. So you can get a second sine wave from your filter. And if you want, you could use this sine wave with this envelope generator here. And you could send that in a really short decay into this sine wave here and control the pitch that way and create a kick drum or a snare drum that way. You can do the same thing with your filter as well, which will have a different timbre to it because you're able to adjust it in a different way. So that's pretty cool. The filter, like the oscillators, all have their own normalizations as well, like the ring modulator. It runs into the filter. If I want to turn up ring modulation, I turn that up here, and now the ring modulator's output is going into this filter, so it's able to be processed before it runs into this amplifier and goes into the mixer section. Mixer section is where you're going to be able to adjust the actual volume. You have a post filter section and a post amplifier section into the mixer. So that's something to think about here. So your VCAs in modular and your mixers, they're not the same thing, although they can function in pretty similar ways. They both control the volume of your sounds, right? But your mixer section is meant to be something that's static and kind of unchanging. You adjust it, you adjust the amount of a signal just going to it, as opposed to your VCA, which can be used as a way to shape a sound. Your mixer's not used to shape sounds, but often in modular, we do use VCAs as mixer sections because they can kind of double as a source like that. Any randomization? There sure is some randomization on it. So the randomization takes place down here in the sample and hold section. Sample and hold and your noise generator. Sample and holds and noise generators are pretty, they're pretty common staples of randomization. So here we can actually get a randomized clock pulse and then take that signal and we can apply it to different places. In fact, this sample and hold should have some randomizations. It has a randomization going to the, or it has sample and hold has a normalization is what I mean to say, going right here to the envelope generator. So it'll trigger the envelope generator or affect it. We have sample and hold going, let's look. We have sample and hold going to oscillator 1. You want to check that out? So here, let's bring up oscillator 1 in our filter section. I'm going to bring down oscillator 3. Opening up our filter. Oscillator 1 is by default bringing a square wave. So that's what we have. And it has some vibrato to it. But partly because it sounds really good. Okay, so now we could actually turn up sample and hold being normalized here. You can hear it adding some modulation to the voice. It's not a huge amount right there, but your randomization that you're going to find in here, you're going to want to actually patch out from. So we could take the sample and hold out. And we also, the sample and hold is coming from the noise generator. So actually, let's play with that again. Make sure gotta make sure you have that stuff turned up. There we go. I didn't have my noise generator turned up. That's why it was having such a low impact. So there's the random pitch. It's pretty cool. It's playing a song for us. So that's one of the randomized things you can do, and that's how the sample and hold works. So the sample is using the noise, and then the clock pulse that it has in here, it has an internal clock. Every time a clock pulse happens, it's sampling the noise and using the frequency, whichever frequency that noise was at the time, using that as its CV source to modulate another parameter. And that's how sample and holds work. Sample and holds work really well with quantizers and Eurorack to generate random sequences, which is not something we can do here because we don't have a built-in quantizer. So if we wanted to get random in this situation, what we'd want to use is the Polyend Tracker. That's something that can be done really easily on the Polyend Tracker because this thing loves to do random. The Polyend Tracker is very good at random. It's very good at filling sequences. It's a great little sampler using the tracker workflow, and currently it is controlling the ARP 2600, which is awesome. And I do have a little bit of music that I wrote that I did want to share, and I wrote it with the ARP 2600, and I wanted the ARP 2600 to lean on its softer, kinder side, if you will, to have something pretty come from it, because I think its filter sounds really nice. get the other VCO in here. If I turned up VCO2, as I said, VCO2 is our LFO now. So if I turn it up, you're just going to hear a click. You want to hear that? That's the sound of VCO2 being an LFO. If you've never heard an LFO before, this is what they sound like. You can hear the LFO going into the reverberator. So here's a sound. Here's a sound to take home. We don't like that sound. Let's go back to VCO3. VCO3 right now is a sawtooth. The best tooth that you can have is a sawtooth. It's probably my favorite waveform. I think it just speaks to me. It's just great for all the kind of music that I like to make. Reverb sounds really good on the ARP 2600. So let's check out some of this music I made. Track 1, we have a kick. Track 2, we have a snare. Track 3, we have some hi-hats with some rolls, some classic tracker sounds. Track 4, we have a bass. And track 8, we have controlling the beautiful Korg ARP 2600M, which we are doing a special on right now. So let's look at it from the top. Shift plus home takes you to the top. Let's just have a listen to this music real quick. Could bring in another oscillator. Right here is where our envelope generator is running into our filter. So all I have to do to turn up the depth of this envelope generator, which has a huge impact on your sound design. But we can get a different waveform from here. We could actually get a second sawtooth if we wanted and bring that into our filter. And all we have to do is replace one of these because these are just audio in jacks. These are just normalizations. You can cut any of them out anytime you want. So we could go like that if we want. So now we actually have the sawtooth and the square wave going into the filter. I think it sounds really great. There's that modulation on VCO3. Oh my gosh, that sounds really good. We can make a nice little pluck. by bringing the release time down and just using the decay. Here we go. Oh my gosh. ARP 2600 sounds so good. We could use the sample and hold on the filter. Let's see. Where do I want to go out? Sample and hold out. So instead of using VCO2 or the keyboard, no, let's use VCO2 slot. Now we're using the sample and hold to randomly modulate our filter cutoff. Can you hear that? Is it just me, or does this thing just sound super good? Because it sure seems like it just sounds really good. The classics, all the classic synthesizers really grabbed my attention. Moog Model D, Prophet 5, ARP 2600, now the ARP 2600M with, you know, much better features than you'll find in the classics. Probably a more stable oscillator too. But this is just such a fun synthesizer to learn synthesis and to play on, and considering its price point, it's a pretty good steal for what you're gonna get. You just get so much from it. We have this whole voltage processor, which you could spend a whole hour just talking about the voltage processor. But there's so much you could do. We could take this noise generator. We actually already have the noise going to the filter, so we can hear what it sounds like when we use the noise. Because it's normal, you don't have to use patch cables. Like, you don't have to be some expert modular synthesis to use the ARP 2600. Okay, let me tell you the things you do have to know to use the ARP 2600. What you do have to know is that typically you want to start if you didn't know how to use this at all, I would start with pretty much all your faders down, and then just know that you have to turn up a few key faders to actually start getting sounds. One of the things you have to have turned up is that you're going to want, typically, most of the time, it says control right here on the voltage controlled amplifier, you're going to want your ADSR one that's normaled from your ADSR here going into your amplifier. This is going to give you volume. So that's volume over time. That's what the ADSR does. Attack, decay, sustain, release, and those are 4 stages of time. And we use those time stages to control our volume. So you want to turn that one up, because if you don't turn it up, this is what happens. You don't hear anything. You hear that sample and hold doing its thing. Just randomly changing our filter frequency. So that one you want turned on. The other one you want turned on is what volume source do we want to go into the voltage controlled amplifier. So this is our volume section. We want the volume after the filter. So here says filter. So we turn that one up. So that without that one, again, no sound, right? We want sound, but we could skip the filter if we wanted and just get audio from the ring mod. And it's doing its own thing over here. Normal to VCO1 at the moment. But let's stick with our filter. because it sounds beautiful. It sounds like Blade Runner. We'll take this sample and hold out because I'm over it. I'm already over it. We're moving on. So that's something you need to know. You want your filter turned all the way up. You want your ADSR turned up in your voltage control section here. And then on this side, you need to have your VCA turned up. So this is in your filter or in your mixer section. You need this turned. You don't need it turned up all the way because it can act as a volume pot for your sounds, but you're definitely going to want this turned up because this is the audio coming from the amplifier is now going in here. But if you don't turn this up, it's not listening. The mixer won't be listening to that amplifier section. So that's another thing you have to know. Besides that, it's over here in your filter section. What sound sources do you want to listen to? Like I said, everything is already normaled for you on here, so you don't have to do any patching. You just turn it up. We have VCO1, VCO2, and VCO3. 1, 2, and 3 right here. And they're already routed right into the filter for you. So you just turn up the faders. It's a piece of cake once you know that. If you didn't know that, you could fumble around on this synthesizer for a while because it can be a little intimidating. But if you break it down section to section, we got sound sources here. This is a subtractive synthesizer. So sound sources go into filters and subtractive synthesis. So this sound source is inevitably running over here to our VCF, our voice controlled fun, aka voltage controlled filter. And we need to turn up which oscillators it listens to. So the filter needs to listen to the sound sources, and then we use the filter to carve off sounds to make tones that we enjoy and or don't enjoy often. And then we take that sound source now needs to go into an amplifier so we can give it some volume and so we can change that volume over time. So once we get into the volume section here, we have to make sure we turn up the filter because that's next. So you turn up that fader to get the filter in here. Then we have to decide how do we want our volume over time and our possibly modulation over time, depending on what source you send your attack, decay, sustain, release generator to. That's the next part of the stage. That's actually what's going to adjust the volume over time here in your amplifier section. After that, that's it. You're going to be able to make sounds. Just plug your MIDI cable in or your computer directly into it because it has USB over MIDI and start playing with your ARP 2600 and have fun. So it's one of those synthesizers that as soon as you know those few faders, we gotta learn a few faders, but really it's just understanding how subtractive synthesis works, that it always goes sound generator, sound sculpting, which is your filter, and then it goes into volumes. And after that, you just play, have fun, sample, and make tracks. Let me check in with the chat, see what's going on. It feels like the heater in the video studio is just cranked up suddenly. I'm getting blasted by some hot heat. Hot heat. I always liked that band name. That was a good band name. A lot of reviews for the tracker are from an early firmware, but the latest one really improves functionality. The latest firmware update? Is that what you're saying, Mr. Gumsy? I'll have to check that out. For me, the Polyend Tracker's kind of always done most of its functions that I would need from it. But yes, this is the ARP 2600. I love it. I think it sounds amazing. You should check it out. We have them available here at Patchworks. We're doing got a special deal going on if you want to come down to the showroom and chat with us about that too. We have it on demo and you can come down and check it out, and I'll come down and show you how to use it, make some sounds. But let's also talk about this sucker right here, the Polyend Tracker, which actually got a little bit of a makeover. I don't know if people know this, but when the Polyend Play came out, Polyend kind of changed their a little bit of their aesthetic on their panels and their side plating. It has this rubbery finish on the sides. It feels real good. It feels very premium, and it makes it so, I don't know what it's. I think it's just not going to break. Maybe that's all its functionality is, but I appreciate it. I think it's a great looking unit. It's a powerful unit. Right now, it may not look like it to you, but I'm actually using it in monochrome mode. I know there's still some green, which is very apparent, but the mode is called monochrome as opposed to using blues and whites. It's using gray, even though it looks blue to you because of the way I color grade. But it is what it is. The Polyend Tracker is like spreadsheet music, and so is Electron. if you're an electron enthusiast, this actually would probably come second nature to you. The kind of music you can make on a Polyend Tracker, or in any tracker, but on the Polyend Tracker, because that's the one we're looking at right now, is not the kind of music that you're going to make on anything else. You can make the kind of music you would make on anything else on the tracker, but it lends itself to making a much more experimental sounds. It lends itself to making much more experimental patterns because it has a lot of amazing pattern generation functionalities. So if we move to pattern 2, this is a completely blank pattern. If I hold pattern and press note, one of these note buttons here, it'll let me see all the tracks at the same time, which is a great feature to have, and I'm grateful it exists. But if I wanted to like throw a bunch of kick drums on pattern 1 here, I can hold shift, press up, and this whole row is highlighted. Make sure I'm in the instrument section, which is the yellow button here, and I just make sure I select fill. And here we have all these different kinds of fill options. So I could say that we want it to fill each step every 4 steps, right? Because we're throwing down a kick drum. So I got it on kick lo-fi, and I hit fill. And now we got this. 32 steps of this. That's pretty cool. Well, let's do it again. Let's do it with another instrument. Let's fill it with a snare. Whichever one says snare. I gotta wait till I can read it. Oh, SNR, that looks good. Yeah, we'll use that one. Okay, so we don't want that on every 4 steps. Let's put that on every 8 steps. But I hope it doesn't put it on step 1. Which it did. Okay, so it put it on step 1. There's something we can do about this. Because that's not where I want the snares, but I also don't want to redo this. So I can actually push these things around on here by using inserts. So I just hit insert until that's sitting on the 9 right there. So that's how you move things around your sequence. It got rid of one of my snares. Maybe I didn't want to go that far. We just wanted to go back up this way. So I go backspace, shift, delete. There we go. One of my snares got cooked. Let's put it back. I can copy this one by hitting copy, and just going right here and going shift, copy again, and that'll put in paste. So that's how easy it is to work on this device. Let's do another fill. Let's do like a random. Here's our density for how much of randomness it will fill. Let's do some hi-hats. So let's find a hi-hat. I already have a bunch of sounds loaded, so. Oh, we had to have a selection. Go back here. There we go, random hi-hats. So that's pretty cool. I like that. I mean, I just like that you can do these filling and random things. What's pretty cool is we can go into, I believe, into the masters section or into our config, and we can set up a scale, right? Pattern scale. Oh, we already do have it on pad scale. I already have it in minor scale. Never mind. Ha. So there's scales, so you can do quantization with it, which is great. So we can go here again. Let's do another instrument fill. And let's get something, a melodic sound. Or you know what we could do? Let's have it generate a pattern of the ARP 2600M. So we'll go back into fill, because we were already in the right spot. I just need to choose the instrument, which is MIDI channel 1, because that's what I'm using for the ARP. Okay. But we don't have notes generated for it. So we gotta do that too. We'll use the minor scale. And we'll do it on every step. Starting, we'll do a from C2. Oh, damn. note. There we go. From C2 to C5. 3 octaves. That's what I'm talking about. Best music you've ever heard. Let's try the other filter type. And if we don't like that sequence, shift up, fill, and we'll go random. We wanted random to begin with. There we go. Oh, whoops. We do have some performance effects. Oh, you can hear that delay going. We don't need to have it be 4 on the floor. What's kind of cool too is that if you want to change out the instruments, you can change out all the instruments at the same time. So we could be like, we can hold this down and just look. Go into the instrument parameters, maybe give it some effects, maybe some delay. The delay's moving real slow. You can always just generate this pattern again until we find one that we like. Hold shift. Oh, that's actually pretty cool right there. Actually sounds great. Another great thing that the Polyend Tracker has that The only other device I know of that has this is the OP1, is that it has a built-in radio. So you can sample off the radio and then slice it in your tracker. It has slices, granular synthesis, single cycle waveforms, polyphonic playback of samples. It will use up your tracks, so it's actually very akin to the OP1 if you think about it. A lot of the features are similar to what you'd find in the OP1 field, albeit the OP1 field is a lot more money than this. But they're similar in their features, which is cool. I do think the OP1 field is another beautiful instrument. Yeah, doesn't the ARP 2600 just sound so good? It just sounds perfect. Kind of like filter type 2. I like it. I would turn this into a track. We can modulate this filter too with our LFO. Make the LFO move slower. Now this song's a little bit more alive. Sounds great. You can also FM your oscillators on the ARP 2600 really easily, mostly because they're just normaled anyway, so they're just already routed to do frequency modulation, but it's not a big deal to use it very easily. So we could take oscillator 1, could do the square wave out and send it over to oscillator 3, which is our main oscillator voice at this moment. We'll pop it into ADSR spots, so we don't need that spot. FM is so fun, you get the craziest sounds. It's not fat that gets. Just the right amount of modulation from this oscillator. So this is audio rate modulation that we're doing. Something that's really fun to do in this scenario is to give it a lot of audio rate modulation like we're doing here. Like it sounds crazy, but instead, we don't want to use this oscillator in here anymore. Now we're just using oscillator 3, but we're audio rate modulating oscillator 3 with oscillator 1. And now we just adjust this frequency. Let's use the sawtooth instead of the square for this. Ooh, there we go. Some bell tones. A lot of fun to play with the synthesizer. Actually, pretty easy to get like some really classic sounds out of it. This is the synthesizer that generated R2-D2 for Star Wars, which makes it extremely important that everybody has one. We all need R2-D2 sound generators in our house, or we're just going to be sad, and we don't want to be sad. That's not something that we're into here. So I hope everyone enjoyed this demonstration of the ARP 2600 and the Polyend Tracker. I think that these are both wonderful devices. I actually really love the aesthetic of the two of them together. It looks really nice. They really do match quite well. And they're really good friends with each other because the Polyend Tracker is a sampler and it really needs a nice warm synthesizer paired along with it, I think. You can just sample into it, of course, but if you had it live, it's got all of the CC messages you could need to control this, because this does have MIDI and this does have keyboard modes. One thing to note about the ARP 2600 that I haven't seen anyone talk about, and my coworker Steven told me about, and I didn't know until right before this stream, is that it actually can do duophonic playback. That means you can play two notes back at the same time. So what you can do is use keyboard CV1 and keyboard CV2, and if you have a keyboard hooked up to it or a sequencer, it'll use the second note that's played. If it overlaps on the other note, it'll send that other note message. You can send that CV out to a different oscillator. So you can make a paraphonic chord. And a paraphonic means that it's, instead of polyphonic, although it is polyphonic because it's playing two notes at a time, paraphonic means that those two notes are run through a filter. That's the big difference between polyphonic and paraphonic. Both making more than one note at a time. Polyphonic is that each sound has its own full voice signal path, meaning a filter and an envelope, or a filter and an amplifier section. Paraphonic, they all share the same voicing section, but they generate different notes. So it all runs through the same filter and the same VCA. It's an important distinction between polyphonic and paraphonic. Cool. So I'm Matthew from Patchworks. This has been Patchworks Live. We're hoping to start to do this show more often in our showroom here in Seattle. Still be streamed, of course, live out to all you folks that are at home that may not be in Seattle or may not be able to get out to the Synth Shop. But if you want to come to the Synth Shop, we're hoping to do that in person. So I invite you to come and hang out with us at Patchworks and see the stuff in person and ask your questions to my face and see if I can answer them. Hopefully I can. Let's talk about some events that are coming up. This coming Tuesday in 4 days, which make my brain scramble because I'm playing this event, but we're having another event. So it's a mod bang event that will be at the 4Bs on March 28th at 7 o'clock. Expert System, Ghost Voltage, Ollie Loops, EasyBot, which is me, all playing at 7 o'clock is when doors open. It is a free show, 21 and up, unfortunately. Wish it was an all ages event, but it is 21 and up. So come on down, check it out, support your local hardware, music, electronic scene. We love to have you. It's a really great time. If you're interested in playing these kind of events, please reach out to me, Matt at Patchworks. Maybe we could get you into a showroom session here at Patchworks as well, which we do live shows here at Patchworks. We'll have another one of those coming up next month. So there's some really great stuff coming up. Community is really important. People need to stick together, get together, make music together, talk together, have fun together. That's something that's really important to us here at Patchworks, and we would like to be a place where people gather. So head on down to Patchworks and talk to us about that. We'd love to work with you. Besides that, ARP 2600 sounds freaking awesome. I think I proved that already. There's so many different sounds. I really wanted to show off how I would use it in my own context. Which is why I paired it with the Polyend Tracker. This is the kind of stuff that I like to do pattern generation and try and get like some really usable, pretty sounds out of something, but also explore its more experimental side, which the ARP 2600 leans pretty heavy into. It's a very exploratory synthesizer, but also normaled, so it's very simple to use. If you're interested in checking one of these out, we have them here at the showroom. You can also reach out to us on our website, which is patchworks.com, and pick one up. Take advantage of the deal while you can. I will see you all next Friday at 3 o'clock. Take care. Have a great weekend.